Welcome to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast, where we explore the fundamental abilities and insights that make us better humans. Here's your host, Christina Eanes.
Hi, everyone. Christina Eanes here. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Essential Skills for Humaning. Today, we have an amazing guest. I can't wait. I love his book. And there's another one coming out on MindShifting, Mitch Weisburgh. Welcome, Mitch.
Well, Christina, thank you. And listeners, thank you for listening.
Awesome. Well, I know they're going to want to hear this information. So before we jump in, can you share a little bit about your background with our listeners?
Sure. So I'm old, I'm I'm just over 70. And so I've done a lot of different things. I've started businesses mostly in the field of training, advised education publishers. And I guess the way I got into mind shifting was as an education technology entrepreneur. I got an email from a university. The university happened to have been in Niger of all places. So I get an email saying we would like U.S.-based education technology entrepreneurs to talk to our undergraduates about using technology in education. And the first thing was, education technology in the U.S. is going to be so different from Niger, which is one of the poorest countries in the world. It's just, and they speak French, and so it's going to be different products and different things. So that was one thing. And the other thing is I was just going through a time where, this was around 2017, I'd been in education for 12 or 13 years. And the whole reason I got into education was, this is how the next generation should really jumpstart to be able to become, fully, competent adults. And our education system wasn't doing that. And I'd been in education for 12, 13 years. And it's like, we were still talking about the same issues we were talking about 15 years ago. And so I was a little bit upset with what, not having the impact that I wanted in education. And so, what hit me when I saw this email was, first of all, U.S. EdTech, but the other thing was, what kids today need to learn is how to look at a situation and consider it from different angles and think about it in a way so that they can be successful. And we don't teach that. So I wrote back and said, what, I don't really think this is going to be particularly helpful, but I could talk to these kids about sense making, how to make sense of situations in order to be successful and maintain that mindset, despite obstacles and despite people getting in our way. And so they got back and asked me, well, would you mind coming out for a semester? And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to come out for a semester. But what I could do is I could teach a 2-day course. And so we agreed that I would teach this 2-day course on what I call sense making. Now I call it mind shifting. Like you shake hands, and then all of a sudden, like, as I'm sure that a number of your listeners are entrepreneurs or they're doing new things. As an entrepreneur, you see a problem, you come up with a solution, you propose it, and what happens if somebody says yes? And you have to figure out how to do it, right? So at that point, it's like, Mitch, you idiot, you don't know how to do this. I'd taken courses, obviously, but I'd never taught this to anybody, and I'd never really studied it. So I read books in like 10 different fields in terms of decision making: military strategy, psychology, neuroscience, cognitive science, education, selling, influencing, all these different areas. And everybody seemed to have this one slice, but nobody seemed to be really putting it together. So what I tried to do is kind of figure out from all these different areas. And I came up with really 3 different strands. One is, how do you think about things and be able to access the most resourceful parts of your brain? Because we tend to go into survival mode where we're, fight, flight, or freeze, or we're doing things the way we've always done them out of habit, or we're just following what other people are doing, just kind of following the crowd. So, but how do you really access the resourceful parts of your brain so you can do critical thinking, you can be creative, you can collaborate, you can connect with people, you can have executive function? So that was the first strand. The second strand is, what is it about the way we look at situations that limits us? Why do we always look at a situation and we think, okay, I'm going to find the one right way of doing this. And once I find that, anybody who objects to it is obviously wrong, and I just have to convince them. And I'm going to do it, and the problem is going to be solved, and that's it. I'm done. And how often does that happen? Like, never, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we look at situations so that we can be more flexible, so that we can be prepared that people are going to object to it, so that we can consider different alternatives, so that when the first thing that comes up that doesn't work the way we expected it to, we're regarding that as information so that we can adjust rather than something that's coming in that's telling us we failed. And then we go into blame mode. So that's a second is how do we look at situations so that we can be resilient? And then the third part of it is that, everything that we do, we're doing with other people. And
Mm-hmm.
very often, some of those people are going to oppose us, right? Some are going to disagree with us. Some are going to get in our way. Some aren't going to understand. Some of them we don't like. So, somehow or other, though, we still have to interact with them over some period of time and figure out how to move forward. And the ways we naturally do that very often don't work at all. Sometimes they make the situation worse. Sometimes they have a short-term benefit, but in the long run, they make things worse, like, rewards and punishments. You can get short-term compliance, but people are going to resent it, and people aren't going to stick with it. And whatever the rewards are, after they get the reward, the next time the reward doesn't mean as much to them. So, so there's probably 50, 70 years worth of research on how we can communicate. And actually, you talk about that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of echoing, many of the things that you talk about in terms of, asserting instead of being aggressive. So that's the third strand, is how do you deal with conflicts in order to move forward and collaborate? So those were the three strands. I put them together over 6 months. I flew out to Niamey, Niger, and gave the class. And of course, since this was a university that taught in English, but people weren't necessarily that skilled in English. So, conducted the classes in a way that I would talk for a little while, then they would go into small groups and they could discuss, and then they would come back. And I know a little bit of French, so we could pull out what they got. And at the end of the 2 days, I'm like, and that's sense making. And they stood up and cheered.
Aw.
Right? Right. Because these are things that, when you see them, it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that just because I thought something didn't mean that it was true, that was just a story I was telling myself. I didn't know that when I said something like this to somebody else, that they would get angry at me. I thought I was being helpful. And I didn't know that when they said something to me, my natural reaction might be to get angry at them. But I don't have to get angry at them. I could think about what aspect of what they're saying, what aspects of that could help me. And so when people got this, it's like, that's why they cheered. And so since 2018, I've been putting more and more of my time into this. I changed the name from sense making to mind shifting because I have a relative of a relative of a relative who said, Mitch, the term sense making is stupid. She says, but mind shifting is what you're doing. You're asking people to change or shift their mindset. So I changed the name to mind shifting because she's a lot smarter than I am.
Nice. Well, can you give a high level overview of what is going on in our brains when we're creating these stories? I know people can dive deep into the book,
Mhm.
but maybe high level.
Sure. So that part is really in the first book,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and or the first course. And my model that I use, and it's simplistic because the brain itself may be the most complex system in the universe, right? It's got like billions or trillions of connections between these different neurons. But we look at the brain as having really two parts. One part started evolving with the first animals that started moving. And you can call that the limbic brain, you can call that the survival brain or the lizard brain. And that part of the brain is most concerned with survival. So if you think about, first of all, if the organism is going to get killed, it can't reproduce. You can't live. Okay, so that's it. And in order to survive, it has to be able to take very limited amount of information, rapidly decide what to do, and then mobilize the entire organism on that, which might be moving towards it, might be moving away from it, might be hiding, or whatever. So that part of the brain activates in maybe 2 or 3 hundredths of a second. So we see something and we react. It's primed to look for danger. So, so that part of the brain, something happens, it makes a decision on what we should do, and we're familiar with, fight, flight, and freeze, okay, which are 3 of the types of things that part of the brain comes up with. But it also looks and says, what are the things that I already know how to do and I don't have to really think about? Okay, what are my fluencies or what are my habits? And then humans have this strong drive to go along with a group of people, and that has helped us a lot. That's why we can build cities, we can build civilizations, but it also inhibits us because we tend to follow the group even if it's counter to our own individual interests or group interests. So it comes up with one of those 5 strategies: fight, flight, freeze, or habits, or mimicking what other people are doing. And that's in maybe a second, that it's come up with that. And then the creative, critical thinking parts of the brain, which evolved hundreds of millions of years later and really are most evolved in human beings. And for simplicity's sake, let's say that they're in the prefrontal cortex, which is the part right behind your forehead. That part of the brain wakes up to a stimulus in 2 to 3 seconds. And that's where we're coming up with these stories. Well, if our limbic or survival part of the brain has said, we're going to do this, then when the prefrontal cortex wakes up, it says, oh, we're doing this. This must be the reason. And then it comes up with a story. Or something happens and the prefrontal cortex says, oh, this is just like something else that happened, so I should do this. And so, sometimes the story triggers the action that we should do. Sometimes the action triggers the story. But once we have locked into the action that we're going to do and the story behind it, our natural disposition is to treat that as a fact, but it's just a story. And the story is there to help us survive, or the fact the stories exist help us survive. It helps us feel good about what we're doing, but it's not necessarily the only explanation. It's just something that we came up with really quickly.
Yeah. So
and this because I've heard you before talk about communications and making decisions.
Oh, absolutely. This is for the listeners, though. Yeah. So we make up these stories. They come from the evolution, our experiences, the people that were important in our lives or had influence over us. That's a lot of I want to say influence over how we see things, and we know how hard habits are to break as well, right? So we've got all of this kind of working against us. So when this does get in our way, what are some ways that we can? I know you have lots in the book, but what are some ways we can shift?
Well, so conceptually, okay. I look at there being 4 types of things. 3 of them we can do by ourselves. Okay. One is if you're aware that your brain sometimes does this, sometimes that awareness is just enough. Like, oh my gosh, I'm getting angry at this person. That's just a survival reaction. I don't have to do that. And boom. Sometimes that's just enough. It's like, okay, I don't have to do that. That's fine. Okay. The second thing is positive self-talk. And positive self-talk is talk that opens us up. So we mistakenly think that we can just urge ourselves on, like, I just have to try harder, or I'm not working hard enough, or I'm stupid. I can't believe I'm making these mistakes. I have to change. That's not the positive self-talk is like, oh, I wonder if there's another way. This person who's talking to me, and I'm starting to feel angry, but I wonder if even 10% of what they're saying is useful. What if I listen from curiosity? So talk that kind of asks us a question, asks us to expand our way of thinking about what we're about to do or what our story is the second possible thing. And the third possible thing is that sometimes that fight or fear, that anger, that anxiety has to be calmed down first. And you can't just calm down by saying calm down, and you certainly can't calm down by somebody telling you to calm down. Now,
No.
if I'm angry and I don't know, just picking on my wife, and my wife says, "Mitch, calm down already." That is not going to calm me down. I'm sorry,
Rawr.
right? Okay. No, calming down is something you do by distracting your brain until it's more mellow, until you
Yeah.
have more equanimity, and you can do that through mindfulness. You can do that through taking a walk. Certain people can do it through making music or listening to music, doing art, doing something that you love to do. So you basically distract the brain until it calms down. If you're doing a breathing exercise, as an example, maybe 30 seconds or a minute of a breathing exercise, like, box breathing where you're counting to 4. Uh, Maybe, just a half a minute or a minute of doing something like that might calm you down. So those are the three things that we can do ourselves. We can be, self-aware. We can do positive self-talk that opens ourselves up. We can do something distracting. Sometimes you just can't do it yourself. And so, and I've listened to you where you brought this up also, is like having a friend, having an advisor, having a relative. So, and I'm human too. So it happens to me, I'll get really angry and I'll go through these three things that I do. And it's like, no, I'm still upset about this. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So, I'll call, I might ask my wife, I might ask, my kids are adults, so I might ask one of my kids. I might ask a friend. It's like, okay, just, walk me through something to calm me down. And maybe they'll walk me through a breathing exercise. Maybe they'll just say, Mitch, why don't we go for a walk?
Mhm.
Um, uh, or, or Mitch, something, you wrote the book. Come on, I'll just turn to I'll open stop your brain from sabotaging your happiness and success, and just
Uh-huh.
turn to one of the pages of the book, and I'll just walk you through one of those things. So, having another person help us and calm us down, um, and it helps to have the other person understand what they're doing, because very often you'll call another person and say, I'm really upset with this person. And what that person will do is start taking your side. Like, well,
Yeah.
what did they do to you? Could you say this? Could you say that? And it's like, no, what you need this other person to do is to understand that you're in a survival limbic state of mind, and you can't be um, resourceful until that part of the brain calms down. And so
Yeah.
walk you through something.
Yeah, I love that. Well, yeah, and I always love to mention to folks that we need people who disagree with us in our life, and we need to appreciate that.
Right. And so that's,
Yeah.
that's actually kind of leads into the second book, which is which is coming out in December
Mhm.
2025, which is MindShifting, conflict and collaboration. And, we think of conflict as bad, right? We say, oh, I have to avoid conflict. But in fact, how many times have you disagreed with somebody and had a conversation, and it's like, oh my gosh, what we came up with is better than either one of us could have. I
Yeah.
had a business partner for 10 years, and I mean, we were both, when I say we were opposites, I mean, we were both very moral people, okay, and we both
Mhm.
cared about others,
Yeah.
but our thinking processes were exact opposite. We would sit in front of a prospect or a client, and they would tell us our problem, and I would know exactly what to do to solve their problem, and she would know exactly what to do to solve their problem, and they would be completely different. And
Uh-huh.
so after the client would talk, one of us would have to say, look, okay, what you're going to hear is the two of us arguing, and it's going to sound like a fight. But just understand that one of the strengths of us working together is we come at problems so very different that when we discuss them this way, we end up with something that neither one of us would have thought on our own, and it'll be
Yeah.
much more complete than you would get from anybody else.
Absolutely. Conflict can deepen relationships, help us be innovative, creative. Have you seen Ted Lasso?
So, no,
Do you know
no,
where I'm about to go
I
with
know,
this?
no, I know Ted, I know what it is, but
You
in
got
my
to watch
case,
it. Everyone needs a Roy Kent in their life.
so my wife will not watch anything that's a series. So we will watch movies. Actually, she goes to the library. She gets a DVD. We put
Huh?
it into the DVD player, and that's what we watch on TV. We do not watch any.
Oh, you got to
So I've
watch
never
Ted
seen any
Lasso
of
if
these,
you
but
can. It's
if I can,
awesome.
maybe I'll
Everybody
ask
needs a
her.
Roy Kent. That's someone who
Okay.
will tell you like it is, or
Roy
tell
Kent?
you something different he loves you, but he's definitely going to smack you over the head with it.
Okay. And we all also probably need to be the Roy Tent for other people, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just finding a way to adapt our communication style so we don't, what triggers, actually, that would be the next good question to ask would be, how can we maybe adapt our communication style or how we approach someone to lessen triggering their limbic system big time? I mean, I know we could a little
Yeah.
bit, right? But to lessen that
No,
triggering.
it's just those people are jerks, and we just have to accept that they're jerks, right? If somebody disagrees with me, they're obviously wrong. And if I give them the logic about why they're wrong, or if I yell at them and they don't understand it, that's their problem, not my problem. Right. So, so I basically use two. I'm thinking about whether to say two or three. So I will say three. So the first thing that I go through, and you can look this up. People can look this up on the internet, or they can get them from the conflict and collaboration book. But the first one is motivational interviewing, which comes from social workers. It was a form of communication that was able to get people who were doing self-harming behavior to see how that behavior was not helping them and talk themselves into change. And then out of social work, it's been used as a way of talking to people for a wide range of purposes, for adults and for teens and for even kids as young as 8 or 9.
Wow.
So motivational interviewing is involving, asking open-ended questions. It's using reflective listening. So you're kind of recapping what the other person is saying so that they know that you understand them. And then you're letting the other person's acknowledgement of their own ambivalence about situations and their own desire for change, because they start seeing they're not getting the results that they want to convince themselves to make changes.
Yeah.
Okay? So first is motivational interviewing, and second is nonviolent communication, which is a way of being assertive without being aggressive. So it's a way of talking about this is what I observed in a way that's non-judgmental. This is the way I'm feeling. And, you talk a lot about the I statements. So this and say I'm feeling you're wrong is not an I feeling, right? Right.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling stressed. It's about my real emotional feelings. It's like articulating the needs. And so, what I need to know or what I need is this. Okay. And then articulating a request, which is the specific thing that you want the person to do. And so using nonviolent communications together with motivational interviewing. And then the third thing is strengths-based feedback. So we tend to tell people what they're doing wrong. Strengths-based feedback starts with what they're doing right. And if you want to do it better, you might do this also.
Yeah.
And so combining those three, strengths-based feedback as you're giving, criticism, or you're discussing what a person is doing, motivational interviewing to get them to talk about what their bigger goals, their smaller goals, what they're doing, is what they're doing getting them where they want to, what other things they can come up with, and then nonviolent communication, which is, okay, so what I've observed is so and so. What I'm feeling is so and so. What I think that we both need is so and so. And so specifically, what we said is that you're going to do this, and I'm going to do this. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
Putting those together, and what you're changing is you're probably moving into that situation with them feeling one thing and you feeling something else. And then you're changing the story to either this is what we both want, or even this is what you want and this is what I want. And if we do this, it meets both of our needs. So you're changing that story.
Nice. Oh, I love it. So I know people are going to want to learn more. Can you share a little bit about how they can get the books or learn more about you, maybe take the courses?
Sure. Okay. So my website, my name is Mitch. So mindshiftingwithmitch.com is my website. And there's links to the books. There's links to my newsletter. There's links to the courses from there. But the two books are, Mind Shifting, Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success, and that's available on Amazon. And then also Mind Shifting, Conflict and Collaboration, and you can pre-buy the Kindle version on Amazon right now. But the book itself will come out, I believe, by the first week in December, maybe even the last week in November of 2025.
There we go. Oh, I love it. Okay, final piece of advice for our listeners.
So I think that the final piece of advice is that all this lies within you. Yeah. So maybe people like me or you, Christina, we can talk to you, but it basically lies within you. And you're a lot more powerful than you realize as, listening to this. And if you can keep that thought, say, I'm more powerful and I'm more capable than I even realized. And so if you're feeling anxious about doing something, you're feeling angry about somebody, if you can stop back and say, something, I really am more resourceful than I realized, that's going to reset you. So that would be my advice. That would be what I'd leave.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. Oh, thank you so much for joining us today, Mitch.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope you and I hope the readers or listeners were able to glean some information that they can use in their lives.
Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights to enhance your journey as a human being. Remember, practice makes progress. Keep honing those essential skills, and until next time, keep being the best version of yourself. For more resources, visit eanestraining.com.